Good morning. Today is Monday, October the 16th, 1 6. And it's a beautiful Monday.
Mm.
Gorgeous. How do you say gorgeous in Russian? Do you know?
Gorgeous ski.
How do you say gorgeous in Spanish? Wait, how do you say that?
Gorgeous O.
What if it's a girl?
Gorgeous.
Today, speaking of gorgeous, we're going to be talking about the red pill. What is the red pill? To be honest, I don't know. But Pastor Eugene will know, and he'll teach us on the red pill and marriage. And guess who? The person everyone loves to hate, Andrew Tate. Oh my gosh, that rhymes. Today we'll be talking about that. All of these things and a little bit more on the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
I'm Juntuck.
I'm Tristan
Tristan who? Tristan Thompson?
Tate.
Who is that?
His brother, Andrew Tate's brother.
Oh. Are they the owner of Tate's Cookies?
Nope.
Maybe.
Those are from the Hamptons.
Oh. Where's Andrew Tate from? Not the Hamptons.
East Europe. I think that's where they
Oh,
live.
is he actually Eastern European?
I think
Well,
so.
we'll get into Andrew
Yeah.
Tate in a little bit. But Pastor Gene, today, how are you this Monday morning?
Great.
And how are you? You suck?
Oh, I thought you were talking to the listeners.
I should do that, right? So I should ask the listener, how are you? And then wait a couple seconds and be like, glad to hear that.
You should tell them about our sponsor.
So we did get an email for a sponsor. This is a very legitimate company with over 100,000 followers on Instagram. Joe Rogan follows them. But we're going to have to say no because it seems a little shady. A little bit. And we're shade-free here. That's what we're known for, the shade-free podcast. But today we are going to talk about what is called the red pill. To be honest, Pastor Eugene, this is the topic that you wanted to address. And I had a little difficulty as I was doing some research. And so today's going to be a little bit more free for all, if that makes sense.
I wanted to address marriage.
Yeah. So red pill in the context of marriage, right?
No.
Marriage is the melding of two metals. No, what is it? It's the combining of two. Anyway.
It's wedding.
Wedding. Oh, gosh. I'm just off today. Must be because I ran so much. So from my research, the limited research that I do have, the red pill is a reference from The Matrix, you know? Bam, 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 bam. Have you ever seen The Matrix?
Yes.
Do you know Neo, you are not my son? Wait, no.
That's Star Wars.
Yep.
Isn't Neo a singer?
No.
Mr. Anderson.
Oh, glasses man. Oh, Morpheus. Would you ever wear Morpheus' sunglasses?
Do you know his brother? Dorpheus?
Wait, that's not real.
That's from The Office.
Oh, man.
So it is from The Matrix. Bang, 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 bang. Do you know what that song is referencing? It refers to being enlightened to life's ugly truths. That's the red pill. Whereas the blue pill would be living in blissful ignorance. The primary belief of those who subscribe to the red pill is that traditional masculine traits are being suppressed today, that males are living at a disadvantage. Whether it's from the feminist movement that they take to be anti-male, they believe that males have disadvantages in areas such as divorce, child custody, and false rape accusations. They also believe that males were not created to be monogamous. Today's culture is not allowing males to be males. That's at least the research that I read. regarding the red pill. So how do you see this infiltrate our society today, and how does it impact the way that the Bible talks about marriage?
Yeah, to be red pilled is something that, when people use the Matrix reference
Yeah.
to refer to themselves as, oh, I've actually now, become awake or
Right,
awakened
right.
to all these things.
An
So the left
awakening.
uses woke, the right uses red pill. I don't think a lot of people that are on the left may listen to this podcast, but perhaps some people on the right may, understand this reference of being red pilled. So once you're red pilled, now you see like how the world really is. You see reality,
Yeah.
just like in the movie Matrix.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of these people that lead this movement. We can't really say it's conservative because I don't think Andrew Tate or these other, figures that would consider themselves to be red pilled really conservative. So they don't live conservative lives, nor do they really hold conservative values. But sometimes
Yeah.
some of the things that people like Andrew Tate would say, some of the things that he would say are, similar or in line with what conservatives say. And so I just wanted to make that distinction. And especially when it comes to the idea of marriage, it's very different. And so I thought we should clear that up, especially since we have a lot of young people that are trying to get married too, or looking to get married, or wondering if they should even look to get married. It's a good thing for us to probably delve into a little bit more.
Wait, so the red pill is a good thing? Because all the research that I did, granted it was off of Google, made it seem like red pill is a very masculine, like glorifying, female degrading thing.
Yeah, that's from a leftist point of view. So
Yeah.
you can be woke and hate the red pill.
Okay,
The
I see.
red pills hate the woke. So you would imagine if you Googled it, it's from a leftist point of view.
Hmm.
And so all these articles would probably write about or against people who would claim to be red pilled. In fact, the Wachowski brothers, now sisters, but Wachowski brothers.
Oh yeah, they're sisters now.
Yeah. The Wachowskis hated that, people co-opted or, use that reference or the metaphor for their right-leaning tendencies. So they made that new movie, I think their fourth installment of The Matrix, and they released it on HBO to kind of combat that. So red pill just kind of means love or something, love whoever you want. But they try to change the meaning of red pill, but doesn't, it didn't really work. Yeah.
So the red pill meaning doesn't just mean anti-feminist or anti-feminism or anti-female or anti-woman at all. But the red pill reference is just an awakening, you're saying.
I think, yeah, for a lot of people use that term to say, oh, I've been red pilled, meaning this is the dominant narrative. And now I see the truth behind it. For instance, you could use it, let's say, for climate change. Some people might use it for climate change. I've been red pilled. So now I know all of climate change is a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would use that kind of terminology. Climate change is a hoax. And I've been red pilled. And I know all these people that are pushing for climate change are either people that are duped because they're still, in the matrix, or people who are, orchestrating all of this, like, the agents.
Mr. Anderson, is climate change a hoax though?
Is that what we're going to talk about today?
No.
Yeah.
But see, that's like a little teaser, a little appetizer for the coming weeks as we talk about climate change. It is getting a little warmer these days.
You mean colder?
Yeah.
Well, it was warm today.
You mean cold?
Was it? Is that just inside my house?
Global cooling.
Yeah. What's up with that?
Climate change.
Oh yeah, they
It's not
changed it to
global
that.
warming.
You could easily say global cooling. Anyway, any hoozle. So the connection between the red pill and marriage. How does those two connect? How are we supposed to view marriage?
There's been a whole movement now amongst people that are leading the charge, or influencers, people that people look up to, especially if you think that you're in this red pill community. And you might not even label yourself as such, but if you think like, feminists are really terrible, they're really destroying everything, and all this stuff, you might be part of that community, whether you label yourself as that or not. But there are now these more prominent, influential people that are out there saying marriage is now bad because the institution of marriage has been hijacked by, the Matrix or
Okay.
the people that are in power.
Yeah.
Because if you look at all the laws are against, marriage. And in fact, if you're a man, especially the whole feminist community, since feminists hijacked the institution of marriage, now marriage is not beneficial for men. Actually, it's harmful to men.
In what sense?
That's what I wanted you to look up.
Oh. I didn't. I have no idea what this is. Sorry.
Things like the laws. So they would say things like, well, I mean, it's true. There are laws that benefit women over men when it comes to, let's say, divorce laws or custody battles.
Mhm.
What is it? 90% of custody battles are won by the mother over the father and things like that. And so there seems to be a large disparity between that. And some people might be like, of course, women should win, but not if you're a feminist. That doesn't, not if you're like let's say a pro LGBTQ person or leftist or woke, and that might actually go against some of your principles, right? Some of those ideas or ideologies that you hold to. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously it's true. And even divorce laws favor women, like in terms of, let's say, alimony payments and who gets to decide that, how much gets to be given, and things of that nature. And what men actually come out with if they do get a divorce, what men come out with. There are statistics out that you could have looked up too, which was now that we have no fault divorce, who initiates most of the divorce? It's women, and it's a large number. It's like 70 to 90% of divorces now are initiated by the woman. And if you initiate divorce, I think you could correlate it to who benefits more from the divorce.
I see. Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
where's the incentive structure at? So if the incentive structure is for women to benefit more from the divorce, then perhaps that could lead to a higher divorce rate and, more women initiating that. So all these things are in place. So now we have people, I forgot her name exactly. It's like Pearl something.
Yeah.
And there's another person, Andrew Tate, that we talk about. There are a lot of people, though.
Pearl Davis.
Pearl Davis, right? Who actually lay it out. And there's videos that go viral to say, look at these statistics, look at these figures. Here are the exact laws. And because of them, we would recommend against men getting married. And a lot of young men have picked up on this. And they are actually, saying they're right. Why would I get married?
Yeah.
But Andrew Tate is a different animal, I think. He just thinks why men aren't supposed to get married.
Because they're not supposed to be monogamous.
Yeah, I think he
something.
used to be in the whole Christian circle in his philosophy, but then he recently became a Muslim convert, from what I understand. I'm not an Andrew Tate expert, but this is what I
Yeah, he
understand.
did become a Muslim convert. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the host of the whatever podcast, which is gaining traction these days, is also
Among Red Pillars. Yep.
But he also believes that males should not be monogamous. That he should just have as many partners as he wants.
I didn't know that.
Which is kind of like the other extreme, right, of the red pill. It's like when you take it to its extreme. But I'm curious though, with all these laws and stuff like that, weren't they put in place? And I want to just kind of think about how people may respond is, weren't they put in place to protect women from the generations and generations of misogyny and the generations of mistreatment? Weren't they put in place for that purpose? And so for men to quote unquote overreact in this way, isn't that kind of illogical?
Yeah. So the way we think about a lot of things in our country, in our culture now, is if we see some kind of disparity, we see some inequality, then it must be, we must divest from it. We must move away from it. But that's not the only thing. The thing that we think now is we have to provide some kind of reparation. We need to alleviate it. We need to make things right.
Yeah.
And the way we do it is by favoring the more discriminated party, the party that was discriminated against, the party that was oppressed. And so if you truly believe that women have been oppressed for you know, for all of their time here on this earth. And now we need to make some kind of reparation.
Mhm.
Yeah, you would make some laws favoring women. So it wouldn't be justice that you seek in terms of equality. It's justice that you seek in terms of egalitarianism, of equalness. And I think the word they use is equity. Obviously, that word has been hijacked. So it's not equal under the law, it's equal outcome. That's the point.
So I guess what would your advice then be to men, young men who are, seeing this stuff on the internet? How would you? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, I think the standard is always, and this is gonna go throughout our podcast. We have to adhere to a standard more and more. What's the standard that we are adhering to? So you could find some things that are wrong, and Pearl Davis, Andrew Tate, and all the like. I think their observations are good. Like they are noticing things that are correct.
Mhm.
Laws do favor women over men. It's not about equality anymore. It's about just giving women, because of some kind of weird equal outcome perception that people hold to, an advantage
Mhm.
in the justice system, which is not justice. And so I think they do have some really good points about how they how they see what is going on. However, I think their solutions are not good because even if you notice something is wrong, so it's the difference between, let's say, in the talking about in theological terms, we can say someone is completely ignorant of their sin. They don't even know that they're sinners and they just live life whatever way they want. Like, a sinner, I'm not a sinner. And then there's the other side who know that they are sinners, but their solution is wrong. They're like, oh, so now we have to work. Now we have to do this or that, when the solution is Jesus Christ. And so the standard is something that I always want to push us to adhere to. What is the standard that we have? Is it a biblical standard or is it a world made standard? And if
Yeah.
it is made by the world, then it doesn't matter if you're on the left or right, politically speaking, it's just wrong. And so, yeah, that's something that we should make clear. So when we talk about marriage and we say, because marriage is so now it's been corrupted by the left, and you hate the left, you hate the woke, you hate all that ideology, I get it. But because it's been corrupted by that, now we shouldn't get married at all. In fact, you're going to go even further. Men have a propensity and inclination, but their base desires and drive is to have multiple partners. Why would we keep ourselves from that? And the reasoning that they use is marriage is an institution that has been corrupted. Maybe marriage 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, it would have been okay for men, but now it's harming men. So for men to thrive, we need to do this. So that could be one of the arguments that some people make. But that standard is still off from what God has given us. There's a reason for marriage. And it doesn't matter if the laws are corrupt. The institution of marriage isn't given by the state, it's been given by God. And that's why we don't marry LGBTQ, even if the state would sanction it. It's because the state didn't give us marriage, God gave us marriage. And so when you go against marriage and what God has given us, we believe that you're actually going against God. So it doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal or leftist or whatever label you want to put on yourself or whatever label you've been given. If it's not the standard in the Word of God, then we can safely say it's not right.
But it's kind of tough though, right? Because we know the importance of marriage because God has instituted to be so. But if the laws are the way that we are talking about them are and give a disadvantage to men, how do we kind of think through that? Because like how do we do that? Because the way that we understand marriage and the way that it's even practiced, I guess, by the courts is different.
Yeah, with marriage comes benefits that states can't, or they can try, but benefits, blessings,
Yeah.
all these pros
Yeah.
that are given by God. And this is what He wants us to do. If you look at Genesis chapter 2 or 1, even, it's God who created male and female. It's God who puts them together. And so God created the institution of marriage. You'll hear this in every Christian marriage ceremony. It's God who created marriage. We don't mess with it because God is the one who created it. And so we just tell people what God created. And we can talk to them about the benefits of marriage. But in marriage, you have societies flourish, or with a misunderstanding of marriage, we see societies crumble. And I think marriage is a core institution of society, of civilization. If you get marriage wrong, however, wrong it is, it's still wrong. So maybe you think that the woke liberals have it completely wrong, and the red pillars are, just a little bit wrong. But I think whatever wrong it is, you'll eventually see the outcome of it, which is the deterioration of society. And so if you want societies to flourish, you have to have that right understanding. And throughout, the history of mankind, we've seen countries actually break apart because they've had, or empires break apart because they had a misunderstanding of marriage, which is exactly what the West is going through now.
So I guess my question is, we talked about how the world is skewing marriage, and how laws are pointing in this way. How can we get on the right track? What does the Bible say about marriage? Could you just give us a short teaching on how men and women should be viewing marriage? Maybe when should we get married? How should we get married?
Yeah, to be fruitful and to multiply is how the world flourishes. This is a command, or the first great commission that you can think about, that God gives humanity. It gives through Adam and Eve to flourish in that sense, to have dominion over the world. And so if you understand that, then you understand that, you're getting married to your spouse is a big deal. It's following what God wants. A lot of people have individualized it, meaning it's just about me loving someone. If I love someone, that's okay. I mean, love is a great fruit in relationships. It's something that you want to strive for. It's actually something that you commit to once you get married. And the reason why love is a foundational characteristic of marriage is because of what it builds between the two people. But yes, what it builds out from the two people, meaning your children, your children's children, and so on. And so marriage is a great thing. It's in marriage that you have a healthy family. You have healthy children that grow up. They understand their positioning within society according to how you and your wife will, if you're a woman, then you and your husband treat each other. So your children see how they fit into the world according to how their moms and dads have actually treated each other and how they treat them. And all these things take place. And so once we get that confused and we think that we can have as many partners, then we've gone back to the self. As long as the self, because, society has degraded the role of men. Men should just abandon these traditional roles and then just do what they, are inclined to do. In fact, we kind of skip over the fact that the reason why men perhaps had these inclinations, these desires, these innate desires to have many partners is because of not just testosterone, because it's built in us to conquer. It's built in us to take over, to innovate, to create in that sense. That's how men were created. And that's something that people will have to, come to terms and grapple with. And women actually create literally by having children. But, when we see things like that and then we see what marriage does, you could see it one of two ways. If you don't have the Christian worldview, you can see marriage as something that will actually curtail, inhibit, bring down what men were, quote unquote, supposed to do, which was to conquer, meaning you could have multiple partners, right? But if you see it from the Christian worldview, men actually not having multiple partners, now committing to one, devoting all of that energy to his family, providing, protecting, and being a priest over his family, is something that actually makes his family flourish. Your children become stronger in that sense. Your children become more confident in the world. They understand their positioning in the world. They see how this is actually going to help not just themselves, but the future generations that follow. And so you can see it one of two ways. I think their assessment is good. Their solutions are bad. Their assessment is yeah, the men have these tendencies, these proclivities, these leanings. They want to be promiscuous because of what's innate in them, because of testosterone chemically, but also, in mentally speaking, this is something that men are more prone to do than women.
Yeah.
And I think their assessment is good. That's right. But the solution without God would be, well, then they should just do it. Because why would we have these, desires to be promiscuous if it wasn't good? And it's exactly the same thing that Satan said. Why would you even want to have that fruit? That's what people always ask too. Why would God even put the fruit in there if he didn't want you to eat it? That's Satan's argument, though. That's the serpent's argument. And so why would you even have these desires if you weren't supposed to carry them out? And so what the Christian should understand is not all desires are good, and not all desires glorify God or are doing the will of God. And so that's something that we have to distinguish and discern. If it's not the will of God, then we shouldn't do it. And we understand that doing the will of God is glorifying to God, but beneficial to us, because what's the other side? The other side is going to destroy us.
Yeah.
And we actually see the institution of marriage being hit from both sides now, multiple sides, where people don't want to get married. They actually wait. And people have come out with articles like, you should learn to live with each other first. So you got, what kind of roommate you're going to have. And so they
Test drive, right? That's what they called it.
They diminish marriage to now roommates now. People call their spouses roommates. And even Christians use those terminologies like, oh, my roommate is this, blah, blah, blah. That's terrible terminology. That's a terrible way to think about your spouse as your roommate. Your roommate is not your spouse, and your spouse is not your roommate, or simply your roommate. And so those are things that we get to see that is happening in the world because we don't understand how pivotal marriage is, what God's intention for marriage was. It's not only to have society flourish, which it does, which is one of the major things marriage does. But we see in Ephesians 5 that there's a mystery that is being unfolded through marriage. This medium of marriage God has given us. The mystery is the union between Christ and his church. And this is something that Christians understand now because of what has been revealed to us in the New Testament.
Could you kind of comment on, and something that you said kind of sparked this question. Could you comment on people always talking about, this is what we were made to do. This is how we did it a long time ago, and therefore we must do it. And, it even goes down to like the paleo diet, right? The paleo diet is a diet that is based on foods human beings might have eaten during the Paleolithic era. And it includes like fruits, vegetables, lean meats, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, stuff like that. Stuff that we don't always eat today. Like no grain and stuff like that, I think, or processed grains. So people stick to this diet because they're saying, hey, the human body was made for this, and we're going to go back to it because we were created like this. We're just guessing, of course. But a lot of people do that kind of stuff, though, where they say, hey, like you said, the male was made this way with testosterone. We were made to be not monogamous and do all these different things. So we should go back to doing that. Do these arguments have any kind of merit, or how are we supposed to view stuff like this? Because I hear this stuff all the time.
Oh yeah. And I think that's the thing about people who want to figure things out without the source. So we want to continue to go backwards, but the dangerous part about simply going backwards, trying to figure out, what we did in the past was, or is, that it can be not just incomplete, it can be completely wrong. So incompleteness is wrong, first of all. It's not close to completeness or perfection, but it can be completely opposite of what we need to do. So like even in the past, we thought that these things were good for you. We found out they're actually poisonous, We used to line things with lead all the time.
Oh yeah.
Paint used to have lead in it.
Yep.
And then people would just die and people didn't know why. We used to call, in the 80s, people used to call the paint that falls off walls chips.
Yeah.
And so they would just be called paint chips, and kids would pick up on this, chips, and they used to eat the paint chips because they thought paint chips were good, but paint was lined with lead, and so they'd be eating lead, and then kids would get very sick and die.
My goodness.
And so there was like a social movement to say, don't eat the paint chips that are from your wall. Don't peel off the paint in your wall and eat it because they look like chips. when we go backwards, it can be very dangerous. When we start saying, "Oh, actually, in the past, we've seen some people eat like this." Well, that's great. I mean, do you have any evidence of them living long, or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I can see why you want to go back because what you see currently isn't working. Again, a lot of this stuff with nutritional science is because people think that we were meant to live forever or something like that. But it's
Mm,
God who determined our days. He's the one
mm.
that shortened it to 120. And so it's one of those things where we have to understand if you continue to work backwards and you're incomplete, it actually can be worse for you than you are now
Yeah.
in current state. What we need to do is we need to go back to the Creator. What was our purpose when God created us? He doesn't keep it a secret. He actually tells us in the Word. So the Word is the revelation of God's will. That's where we find where we get salvation, where we get our purpose. The major, like the big themes, are all covered in the Bible. When I say, and what I mean by that is the Bible won't tell us that we can't eat ice cream or smoke cigarettes. But if you have the big things down, I think the small things start to follow.
Oh yeah.
And so when people are like, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about marijuana. Well, it does talk about being inebriated, being of sober mind. So while it doesn't condemn or forbid marijuana, you can infer from just that statement that we shouldn't like seek to be inebriated all the time. In fact, that's a terrible thing. In Isaiah, it's pronounced as a curse when you mix strong drink, mix spices with your wine. And so we have to go back to creation. We have to go back to our creator. We have to go back to the one that gave us purpose. And it's God who teaches us that. And once you have that, we could have the debates. We could have the debates of what can be complex and whatnot. But if you don't have that, then you'll mix up even the most basic of institutions, aka marriage.
It's interesting how people always look to the past, and people say, "Hey, because we did this in the past, we shouldn't do this now," or "Hey, because we did this in the past, or because we did this in the past, we should do this now." It's very interesting how people's just opinions just change back and forth, based on what they want. But I wanted to also talk about when we should get married. I know that I kind of posed it as a joke, but bum bum bum, it was not a joke. Um, According to the United States Census Bureau, these are the median ages of first marriage. And I thought this was really interesting. The median age of the first marriage for males and females in 1950, male was around 23, females was a little over 20, 20 and a half. 1980s, it was females were 22, males were 25. The year 2000, females are 25, males are 27. Year 2022, females are 28, males are 30. And so we have jumped a long time, a couple of years per every like 20, 30 years on the median age of people getting married. So I guess first, why do you think that is? And as a Christian, I know that there's no right age to get married as a Christian, but it seems like the trend, the trajectory that we're seeing is just older and older and older. How are we supposed to view this as a Christian? How do we view marriage in this? Like, how do we view marriage as a Christian? How do we view this?
Yeah, we can actually literally see how our culture is changing and evolving from in the past, people used to think, oh, 30 is a little bit old, but I'm
Yeah,
glad
yeah.
I'm getting married just one generation ago. And even maybe earlier on in the current generation, people thought that. But now it's like, if you're under 30 and you're getting married, you're like, wow, you're getting married
It's weird.
young.
It's
You're
weird.
getting married young.
Yeah.
So it has been evolving, and it has evolved to this point where people actually think that if you get married before you're 30, you're getting married young.
Mhm,
This is false.
mhm.
This is fake news. Even if you're close to 30, you're old.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to childbearing and all of that stuff. It's not just for women, it's for men too. The sperm that you carry or the eggs that you're carrying all evolve, like meaning they all start to get mutated over time because of the exposure we have of the elements of all the chemicals that we eat and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's best when you're young to have your strongest children. In fact, even before all of this, people in the ancient world knew this. Like Jacob would talk about Reuben saying he is the strength of his loins because he was his firstborn.
Mm.
And Reuben was such a big disappointment to him because, he went up on his father's bed. And so he would mention this. That's why firstborn had such a weight to it, because people understood the strength that the firstborn carried, both physically and status-wise in the family. And that's why primogeniture, or like the whole firstbornness, God flips and he makes the secondborn like really significant in the Bible. It's to understand nature first and what God is doing by showing what we thought naturally. But now we don't even understand nature. So we wouldn't understand like why the firstborn has significance, or we will just be like firstborn, nothing, right? Which is just foolishness. We don't even understand why being firstborn has such a weight, and why you carry, let's say, people would have thought superior genes because you were the firstborn, or you were the strongest. And so now that I've said that, naturally speaking, physically speaking, getting married younger is way better for you, like energy wise, you having, just better capacity to birth healthier children, all that stuff. When you get married post 30, then we've had a lot of women in our church too, who's had their first kid close to 36, and then they put you on geriatric care. A lot of women are on actually have diabetes when they get pregnant, and so they have to watch what they eat because they're not healthy, things like that. And so there are all these complications can come up as you age, and that's absolutely true. It's just a fact of life. It's nature. But we don't even understand that. But now, nature, now that we've covered that, hopefully, maybe not exhaustively, because you can look at it as a complex reason behind why people are getting married later. Adolescence, even though our body's getting older, our mind has not been developed. No one's telling you need to go out and make money. You need to raise a family. You need to make sure that you're responsible for the family. If you're a man, this is what being a man is. No one's telling you that. They only tell you not to be, not to have toxic masculinity or something like that.
Yeah.
But what is it to be masculine then? And then the only characteristics people give you is to be feminine. Like you need to be sensitive. You need to know that crying is okay. And that's where all these other people have come out and said this is ridiculous. And so when people have said that, it resonates to a lot of young men. Obviously, it's ridiculous. That's a good assessment. However, the solution is what is important here. Yes, it's ridiculous to think that being a man is to be feminine. That's nothing. Being masculine is to be a man. To be a man, you need to be masculine. What does that mean? It means you need to prepare to be a responsible man. And if you're going to get married, to be a responsible husband, to understand what gender roles are. If you can't even define that clearly, no wonder you're confused about marriage. You can't even define your role as a man in society well. And so you don't even know, because now we've had maybe one or two generations prior to us who didn't even understand what a man is, what a man's supposed to do. It's like, oh, you think the man is supposed to wear the pants, and bring home the bacon? That's such a old patriarchal way of thinking, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, until it comes to war, then yeah, it would be ridiculous to send our women and children out first.
And that's what Hamas is doing, so.
Yeah. But, it's these things that when we confuse just even our basic understanding, just nature-wise, we start confusing a lot of things. Now, spiritually speaking, men are supposed to represent something that's supposed to show the world what God wants us to show. And in terms of marriage, men are supposed to exemplify Christ. The way Christ sacrificed, gave up his life for the church, men are supposed to do for their wives. The way he led the church, men are supposed to lead the wives. The way he he cares for the church, men are supposed to care for the wives, and things like that. So, and that's why, in Ephesians 5, 1 Peter 3, many other places like Colossians, where it talks about men and women, we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And so these are places that we see in the Bible. And the Bible isn't just saying this is something that I want to do for, the church in Ephesus or anything like that. Paul goes all the way back to creation. This is why we were created. And so when Paul is, referring back to creation, it's something that we have to go back to say, actually, this is why we were created. It goes back to the whole thing about why you were created, what the Creator intended when he gave us the institution of marriage, when he created male and female. And so I hope people get to really understand that. And the more you dive into it, the more you explore it, the more you study and meditate upon it, you really see it is a beautiful thing. Just because it's a profound mystery, Paul didn't stay away from it. He was fascinated by it, and he would continue to dive deep into the things that are mysterious and wonderful.
So I think two of the reasons why some people, our younger people, may be a little wary of marriage today is, number one, how do I know that this is the one? How do I know that this is the one, like Neo? And number two, weddings are so expensive. So that's why I can't get married. It's not that I don't want to be married. It's not that I don't want to have a husband or a wife and have kids and be young and have, as many kids as possible. That's not why I don't want to be married. It's I can't because I don't know if he or she is the one, and they're expensive. So how would you respond to that?
There's a lot of complicating factors now in our society today where, I think I mentioned the two-income trap that people have now all of society now does. There are very, very few families where only one person works. And it's either because the other person can't, or they are affluent enough socioeconomically that one person doesn't have to. And so if that's the case, then, there are some things that we can explore and to get. But biblically speaking, let me put it simply, when should you get married? It's not if you find the person, you should get married because God told you to. Because otherwise you might be burning with passion. You look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 9.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 9 reads, "But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion."
You could actually be sinning by not getting married, because not only are you burning with passion, which is a bad thing, you're not exercising self-control. The fruit of the Spirit, which is godliness, which is contentment, which is sanctification, all that stuff. And so if you can't exercise self-control and you're sinning, you're burning with passion, you're busy looking for the one. I believe you've got it backwards, my friend. What you need to do is you need to be preparing to get married. You need to work on the self. It's a very selfish thing to think that I need to find the one to get married, because what that implies is that this one will satisfy you. This one will serve you and your needs. So they will fulfill your needs because they're the one. Instead of thinking, I need to make sure that I build myself, train myself to be, a good husband for my wife or a good wife for my husband. It's very self-centered. And a self-centered beginning and origin, man, that spells out disaster for your marriage and family, because you're always looking for self-fulfillment. Why do people get divorced now? It's because they're not, the husband is not emotionally there for them or something. It's not emotionally gratifying to be married to this person. What kind of garbage is that people think? Well, be that person for the other person then. Be the one that, you think that you should be for the other person, instead of thinking this person needs to do this for me. No longer do people think like, oh, in a marriage, it's a two-way street. Even that I can say I can push back against, but it's just a one-way thing where this marriage, this husband better do this for me. Otherwise, I'm just going to divorce him and find someone else who will do it for me. Which is, which is not only self-serving, it's illogical. Not everybody can think like that and you can't have a good marriage, period, because you're expecting one person to fill every single part of your needs. That's illogical. It's unreasonable to think like that. Well, what about if I have a list? And this is why I hate lists. A lot of women that I've spoken to used to have lists. You know, I want my husband to be this, 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 and that.
Handsome.
You know, whatever it is. You know, they could have physical attributes, they could have social attributes, economic attributes, right? And then, you know, they find someone that would match that list. And I think that's a natural way women think. You know, I see more women do this than not, is my point. Not every woman does it, obviously. But the reason why there is a big danger to that is that list cannot be the number one thing that, you know, you look to when you get married. And they're like, well, what about if I put Christian as a priority?
Yeah.
Well, if you have a list, then get out of here. No. That's not how. I think people just put that like, you know, like, oh, this is like a default thing. I just need to put on a list. Has to be Christian.
Christian and handsome.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm.
But, you know, men have things too. They may not have a list, but maybe it's one. She needs to be very physically attractive. Maybe that's just the one thing that they have. And then, you know, things like that. But what people do is when you date and you start putting the person up against your list, it's pointing to something that your list will fall short of. And I think a list can be that, but most lists aren't that. I think when you date someone, it should be with the intent to get married. But that dating needs to be an exchange of, well, a communication of an exchange of values. So Christian is obviously number one, because if you're not a Christian, then even the base worldview value that you have is not in line. And it's a sin. The Bible says so, right? And so one of the things that you do when you date is you talk about values. That's the number one thing. And I get it that physical attraction can get that conversation started, because it's hard to talk to someone that you're not physically attracted to, because you want to look at them for the rest of your life. And that's how young people think. That's fine, because, you know, I tell men all the time, you're very attracted to this person physically now, but let me tell you, they'll change. Once they have kids, they'll physically change. And once your wife goes through menopause, she'll physically change. There's physical changes that women go through. What's to say that you will stand by this person through their physical changes if the physical attribute is the main thing that you look at? There needs to be something beyond that, even though initially you might be physically attracted. It has to be values. And if your values don't line up, that's the thing that you should be talking about and working on. And so you should do that, because when your physical values do not line up, you will have problems. And it especially will come out when you raise your children, because their physical values will really come out then on how you raise your children, from even things like, you know, using the Ferber method or not, you know, not going to their crib when they're crying versus, you know, going to their crib, but only after 20 minutes, to just going to their crib in 20 seconds, whatever it is, right? Like, that's all value system. And so that's what you should be working on, and how you can grow together as a family with one value system, because you can't have like 15 different value systems and expect the family to be cohesive in any sense, or to maintain any kind of unity. And so that's why the Bible gives us guidelines and imperatives as they do. That's where headship is important. That's where being subject to your husband is important. That's where, you know, respect is important. That's where all these things come into line. And if you don't have these things, you know, no wonder you have such a problem. So it goes back. Let me go back to your initial question, which is, when should people get married?
Yeah.
As soon as you have a desire to get married, meaning you have this physical bodily desire. Maybe it is even a spiritual thing, but whatever desire that you have to get married, you should get married. And usually it's way, way earlier than 30.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, unless God gives you a special anointing to house self-control of your body and your desires. No. And that's the whole point of chapter 7 in 1 Corinthians. You need to get married, because without exercising self-control, you're sinning. That's what it is. So you're in a state of sin right now. So prepare to get married. It's better to prepare to get married. And how do you prepare is what I really wanted to hone in on, speaking about value systems. Just because you like each other, just because you get along in conversation, that's not why you date. And this is why a lot of young people get it confused. And that's why when they get married, they get divorced, because man, in the beginning, we really, really hit it off. I don't know what happened. The fire just died. No, I think your value systems were completely different. You were able to joke about The Office or whatever together, and you thought your value systems were in line.
Yeah.
They weren't in line. Just because you could joke about the same things doesn't mean your value systems are in line. It can be a good start, but you need to go way deeper than that. That's my point. And so when you talk, when you date, you need to have those value systems in line.
So it is interesting though, now that you bring that up, with the increase in age for marriage, like median age, I wonder if it's a direct correlation to the increase in pornographic addiction. Pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, the stats are out. People are getting exposed to indecent things like pornography, even at very young ages in elementary school. I think
yeah.
fifth grade was like the median or something like that, which is insane. Your bodies aren't even ready to like get married, let alone you're being exposed to this kind of stuff, which is actually anti-marriage. So even from a young age, we are being like conditioned to not have successful marriages, which is terrible.
I do have a question though. And I understand that obviously being a Christian and being a believer is just a given. That's a biblical command. You don't want to be unevenly yoked. But I see a lot of times people almost compromising that command, saying, oh, this person's a new believer. This person's a young believer. And you know darn well that this person is not a believer. But they'll justify it by saying, oh no, but he or she is a young believer. They're a new believer. So how do we think through that? Because there have been relationships where the wife or the husband does come to church, right? By God's grace. And so they'll use that as an example of like, hey, this happened, so why can't this happen to me? I love this person and they're just young. They're just a new believer. That's all it is. How do we kind of think through that?
Yeah, let me use a Korean word. Let's educate people in Korean. There's a Korean word called
Seokang.
chung.
Oh, chung.
What are you gonna say? What?
Seokang.
Something, yeah.
Seokang
I love seokang.
That's a great Korean
Shrimp
word.
cracker.
And chung actually encompasses a lot of things if we were to translate it. But I like using the term chung because chung does encompass affection, a closeness, a friendship, all these things that emotionally connect us with people. But chung can't be the thing that will get you married. And so people call it love in the English language, but I don't think it really equates to what we understand to be biblical love. So if you date someone for a long time, people don't want to break up because it precisely of the affection and emotional connection they already have, which is chung, okay? The dangerous part about that is when we know we should disconnect or sever the relationship because this will provide trouble for us in the long run, perhaps very detrimentally, we still won't because we don't want to get rid of the emotional connection that we have. And so that's why people might even date longer than they should when they know it's not right. And then when the chung falls away, then they'll break up or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This is a very unwise way of acting, but this is a lot of young people will do this. And quite understandably, because young people aren't, I think, trained to see things that way. And I think that's a very important thing to understand. People need to make sure that when you are training to get married, you're training to love that person. Not you love that person, you get married. You marry to love that person. And so when you see it that way, that is a more accurate biblical trajectory than I love this person and I will get married so that we can stay in love forever. No. In marriage, you grow in love. That's what you should be training to do. So you can't say definitively that I love this person with everything that I have. And that love, I just hope that it just stays the same. And no. The love will evolve. It will continue to grow in that sense. And that's what you are committing to do when you get married. And so as a young person, how do I make sure that I understand this? Well, it's to actually look out for the pitfalls of youth. And one of the major pitfalls is when you are dating, you are hopelessly, um, undoubtedly, in my opinion, given into Jung. Always, always. And even when you're older, which makes you even more unwise. There are people in their 30s who immediately fall into Jung. On that topic, if you're going to call someone honey,
Would you call? Yeah.
they better be your spouse, or they better be like your child, or you better be from the South. I mean, excluding those, don't call
Or
people
just
honey.
or honey or just honey itself. What would you go like? What is the most? What nickname would you say?
What?
Like, what is the most that you would go?
Yeah, I would say term of affection for my wife is "Hey you." Hey you, did you eat? Something like that.
It is
Yeah.
affectionate.
Very, very
and
affectionate.
effective.
Yeah, yeah. In Korean, it's translated differently though.
Just
Yeah.
No, I was thinking chagi, but that's
oh, chagi, that's mine.
fine.
No, what? What am I saying? What chagi just means you?
It means you.
What am I saying?
Yeah, it's funny. Language and culture, it really plays a part into our understanding, and even in terms of affection. Obviously, I'm joking about the whole honey part. If you don't know, we're just poking fun at a staff member. But all these things that we do is to understand that, in all seriousness, I think that's actually a good example, because it should place us in, a place of understanding. We should be in this place of understanding that says, oh, I need to have discernment. I need to know what's going on instead of just going with the flow, what comes naturally. You need to understand what is actually going on and steel yourself for any kind of pitfall that you might fall into, and eventually come out with a lot more hurt than you should. That's what wisdom would probably dictate.
So, talking about this makes me think about, and this is something that you said before too, but I think as Mobb Deep once said, I think we got it all twisted. I think some people have it twisted. Where that's an underrated joke. Only the real ones will get it. But people don't think that marriage is a duty. I think it's a very Western and very new Western thought where we marry for love. So like people want to fall in love before they get married, and they don't really consider marriage to be a duty. Whereas back in the day, even in Middle Eastern and in Eastern cultures, marriage was a duty. You don't always pick your spouse. It's a duty for you to get married, and carry on your name or help around the house or whatever it might be. It was your duty. Now it's just love. There's no duty attached to it. So I'm just wondering, as a Christian, where do we align on that between love and duty? I'm not saying that these are mutually exclusive, but where do we align on marrying for love and marrying for duty?
I think marrying to love is probably more correct.
Oh, it's a fire line.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't love the person before you get married, or it is of no consequence whether you love the person or not when you get married. But it's talking about trajectory. So marrying for love seems almost end, like the end. This
Yep,
is the end.
that's it. Yeah.
The marrying to love means this is the beginning.
Oh,
And so
somebody.
what we want to do is, regardless of whether you think you love this person to the maximal degree or you're just starting to love this person, I think the point is, what is the trajectory? And if you're not looking at the trajectory, then you're not looking at a huge part of what marriage is going to be, which you're setting yourself up then. And yeah, I get it that in the past, people just, arrange marriages. And modern day, we don't really do that very much. I think there's pros and cons to both. I don't think, we should go to the past where we arrange each other's marriages, but I don't think we should look down on that either, saying this is completely backwards. Well, that setup actually led us to today where we are thriving. So without that setup in the past, we wouldn't have thrived the way we do today. And so I do appreciate in the past that we may have had some kind of arrangement in marriages, but it doesn't mean that it was like people were brought down necessarily with chains and they were shackled and like you ship your daughter off somewhere. I don't think a lot of cultures did that. Maybe there were, but not many, in my opinion. And historically speaking, I really don't find that in even the gospel accounts where people would, say, "Oh, I'm engaged to this person," and then they would already start devoting themselves to each other
Yeah.
as if they were married, obviously without consummating the marriage.
Mhm.
But they start devoting themselves to each other. And I think that's a good thing. And that's what we see today too in the dating world. You start to devote yourself to each other as if you were married without consummating. And so I think that's a good thing too. You definitely don't want to go too much, but you don't want to do too little. I've seen the opposite where people will be like, I'm chill, I'm cool, I'm dating this person, but we're not married, so whatever. That might not be the best way to look at dating, to be honest. And then there are people who obviously go overboard. These are people that we probably had more experience with. That's why, sometimes when you go one extreme, you tend to go the other extreme, which is not good either. You just want a good biblical approach, a wise approach.
Does a purely emotional love view of marriage downplay the idea of the covenant in marriage?
I think you've answered that question by the way you stated it. Absolutely, yeah. And so, if you think love is purely an emotion and not a giving up of the self, like meaning physically, emotionally, intellectually, all of that stuff, then yeah, you don't have a complete understanding of not just marriage, any kind of relationship. Yeah, you can't have a purely physical relationship with anything or anybody. It doesn't work that way because we're not just simply physical beings. We are spiritual and physical. And so when we have a relationship, there is a connection on those dimensions. And so even dating wise, you can't be thinking that, this is just a physical thing or this is just simply an emotional thing. That's foolish talk. And so to prepare yourselves to devote yourselves even more and more as time goes on would be a thing that would not only be wise, but it would just be my personal opinion is basic. We don't have these basics. That's why we think like the emotion is the primary thing, or this guy or this girl makes my heart flutter, blah blah blah, and that's what is going to be determinant of whether I stay with this person or not.
Mm.
Because that's not true. The heart only flutters for a little bit and then it goes away.
That's a heart condition, actually.
Yeah, you might need to you might need to watch a.
Yeah, that's an issue.
You might need to.
That's not.
Make an appointment with a cardiologist.
Yeah. I think these marriage questions are really interesting. I loved you when you said you married to love. That's a really good one. I don't know why I said it like that.
Bars, as they say.
Who says? Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And I think, this topic is a hot topic for a lot of our listeners. And so if you have any questions on marriage or anything related to relationships, although we have done an episode before, you could always email us at podcast@cgsnj.org. Before we run out of time, I wanted to quickly go into some current events and a Q&A, if you don't mind. So cue the current events, Mr. Brian. So I wanted to continue our conversation on what is happening in Israel and the Middle East. There have been a lot of conversation about colonization, decolonization, free Palestine. I mean, as Christians, as we're praying for this conflict to end, what is the solution that we're praying for? Are we praying for two separate states, or are we praying for what? Are we praying for the eradication of Hamas? What are we praying for?
That's a good question, and I think we're gonna, continue to explore this. One thing that I really wanted to get at on our podcast, I believe on Tuesday, was what is clear is clear. What is complex can be complex, and we can kind of parse it out. We could tweeze it out over time. But what is clear needs to be clear. When you murder babies on purpose and rape women on purpose and then celebrate it, that needs to be unequivocally denounced by the world. The fact that that's not happening, and then we want to complicate it. We want to say, actually, it's so much more complex than you think. You have actually become the fool. And that's what we want to say. We want to make clear what is clear. Now, this idea of colonization and decolonization are terms that are being thrown about in modern day because, we have been convinced, and we have been really, in my opinion, we've just been brainwashed into
Yeah.
thinking that the West are colonizers.
Mhm.
Simply that. And colonization is just black and white evil. So to decolonize, you need to do anything that is possible, which would be necessary to decolonize. So if it includes the rape of, women and children, or the killing of children, so be it, as long as you decolonize.
People say, what did you expect?
Yeah. And I think that is evil upon evil, because not only are you evil, but you are truly dumb. It's truly a foolish way of thinking that this is something that we should have expected. And people always take that Martin Luther line out of context too, like, a riot is the language of the unheard or something
Yeah.
like that. And so that's always taking things out of context. He was not for riots, things like that. And even if he were, he would have been wrong. We talk about it in the podcast, but the ends do not justify the means. If it did, then God would not have shown the restraint and patience that he has
Mm.
for all of humanity, or given us the common grace that he gives all of humanity. And why would we even bother being sanctified if the ends justify the means?
Yeah.
That's not. The ends have, the means have everything to do with the ends. And so even if you think you've achieved an end, but the means were off, then you didn't achieve the end that you think you did.
Yeah.
So decolonization, really, we're trying to show things for what they mean, perhaps. But a lot of people, what they mean by decolonization, not everybody, but a lot of people, is the eradication of Israel. Meaning they say things like they want a contiguous land from the Gaza Strip to West Palestine or West Jordan, which means they mean the eradication of Israel as a nation state. They don't want to, they don't want to acknowledge, Israel came in, they kicked all these Palestinians out from their homeland, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And then we went through some history about that, about historically, biblically, whose land it was, and whether you can, I suppose that we could have a argument about that. And I think that's where it does get complex, and I'm fine with that. I just don't want to do that here, if that's okay. If we want to devote ourselves to a political podcast in the future, that's fine. I don't mind, as long as we, have biblical foundations. We could sometimes disagree on certain aspects. But if you can't unequivocally say what Hamas did was evil and they need to be stopped permanently from doing it, then I think there's something wrong. Yeah, morally. Your moral compass is definitely off. For some odd reason, when it comes to the Middle East, people are very, very emotionally involved. I find that to be intriguing.
Yeah.
Like, some Christians are extreme Zionists. They think that the building of the next temple will bring forth the coming of Jesus Christ sooner, or something to that effect.
This piece.
And so they want this to happen, or something like that. Or some people are very, very sympathetic to the people that were displaced because of Israel coming in, and the generations thereafter, which is, a lot of people in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And so, again, we want to differentiate between the Hamas, the people that might not agree with those in the Gaza, with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, but even the PLO, the people in West Jordan who are Palestinians, who have representation in Israel's parliament, that do not agree with Hamas or Hezbollah or anything like that. And there are those that do agree with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. Today I saw in Baghdad, like thousands of people actually praying for Hamas
Mm.
for their, success in their journey and things like that. So, yeah, there are people who are for the destruction of Israel. We call that anti-Semitism, but I would say it's just the eradication of all Jews. That's what they're really looking for. That's all.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about how to pray before in the podcast that we released last Tuesday, but what solution are we praying for? Are we like what what's our goal?
So
What's our aim?
this is my take, and I think if you have a political solution that you want to pray for, that's fine. If it's good, if you think it's good, that's fine. But I would always keep an open palm on this one, meaning I wouldn't hold on to it too tightly.
Mm.
The ultimate solution we are praying for is Jesus Christ to penetrate into the lives in that area. You have to realize that the Middle East and all those surrounding nations, even in the Middle East, meaning like even Northern Africa, like Turkey and beyond, and north and east of Israel, they're Arab nations. They're predominantly Muslim nations. And we want Christianity to infiltrate those nations, to take over, the Muslim dominance that they have. That's what we want. We want Jesus Christ to be actually Lord and King politically, even there. That's what we want. I think that's what we need to pray for Christianity to come in, because right now, what they are, what they want is not good enough. And the reason why we say that for Israel and all their Arab, surrounding neighboring Arab nations is because we do believe that this is what God has commanded us to do as Christians. When it comes to the Middle East, I think people are confused because people just, for some reason, I think I can probably name a few, like indoctrination in schools and things like that. But for some reason, when it comes to the Middle East, people are especially emotional because they believe that, one is the oppressor and one is the oppressed. And so people have just separated all of society into oppressed and oppressor. So who did wrong and who is more in the wrong? People just want to continue to think in those terms and those terms only. And then if there is someone that did wrong, then the other person must be angels. I think that's a very naive way of thinking. It's too simplistic. It's too reductive. There is wrong across nations everywhere. I think we're especially emotional about this because the Middle East is the hub of the three major religions in the world today. And so I think there's a reason why. But if I were to, again, like I said, talk about it simply and clearly, we need to pray for God's kingdom to come, meaning Jesus Christ to reign over these lands. And that's what we got to pray for. And that also includes some political stuff, but I think broad strokes, we are praying for peace in that area. And peace does entail the complete stop of the most egregious sins that we have been witnessing over the past week, which again, let me just say, is the raping and murdering of women and children. Can we at least say that? If you can't say that, then I think you hold to a dangerous moral philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I've even heard of somebody say like, "Is that enough?" And I know we've talked about it. Can you just briefly mention, is that enough? Is praying enough?
Yeah, I mean, prayer will lead to other actions. That's for sure. But I think there's something even bigger than that. I think prayer is appealing to the one who is in control, who does have the power, who does give gifts according to his wisdom, and gives opportunities and all that stuff. And so prayer is priority, and prayer is something that we've commended to do, so that not only do we align ourselves with God's will, we understand that my will might not be perfect. In fact, many times it is not perfect. It's wrong. And so it changes my heart, which is a very necessary thing to happen because you are not perfect. And so we continue to pray. And that's why I take some care into explaining some of these things too, because, if I continue to go into the specifics, it might not be perfect. There might be some things that we may miss, things like that. So people have come up to me when even I think a few years ago, someone was talking to me about the Israel-Palestine conflict, saying, these are the harms or atrocities. These are the bad things Israel did. How can you defend that? And I was like, I'm not defending that. I'm not an Israeli apologist here. I don't defend the evils that people do. What I am saying though is you don't equate it though. You don't equate, let's say even if it was what you say, it is an eviction of people from their homes of, multiple generations. You don't equate that with murder. You don't equate that with rape. You don't equate that with the beheading of children, things like that. Just they are not equal. And if you don't understand that and you think that, well, this was a long time coming because of the colonization of the West and blah, 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 then yeah, you've been indoctrinated by the left. Yeah, you have been convinced otherwise, and you can't tell from your left and right. You don't know what's right and wrong anymore because you just think this one thing. And I think that is a very dangerous place to be in. And I'm sorry that you are. And I hope that, you will come out of it quickly, and that you'll see, that's something that I need to continue to keep in prayer for.
Thank you. And we will continue in prayer. We're going to quickly move on to Q&A.
We need a beat.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
This is a question from one of our listeners, and it reads, on the recent sermon on pastors, leaders, etc., and submitting to elders, is there a difference between submitting to what is taught on Sunday service versus what is spoken of during more casual settings like the podcast? For example, would it be sinful or dishonoring if someone were to do laundry on Sunday, which was mentioned as not ideal in a podcast, but wasn't mentioned during Sunday service? In other words, is there a difference in responsibility of members to listen, submit, fight, to understand a Sunday service versus podcast teachings? Is there a difference between preaching on Sunday and podcast, and is it okay to treat them differently?
Well, let me challenge the premise of the question, though. The preacher isn't ultimately authoritative in all that he says. That's not what we're trying to say here. What we're trying to do is, what the preacher does is he preaches the Bible. And the Bible is the one that is ultimately authoritative.
Right,
We say inerrant, infallible. So you can't go against the authority of the Bible. And when we give practical examples, which, preachers ought to do in their sermons, those are broad general applications that we ought to do, which is great. But it always goes down to the specifics, of how you wake up, make your bed, all this stuff. There's wisdom to that and to living well. There's the sanctification process. There's all these things that come into account when we live out the way we ought to. So when we confuse, let's say, a directive from a pastor to say we shouldn't do this necessarily with, this is now idol worship, then, listen to our previous podcast on legalism, and antinomianism.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you do the things that you do in gratitude, in thanksgiving to God, in worship to Him. And so when we don't do laundry on Sundays, it's because we're busy, worshiping God. I don't know. I don't think I talked about laundry on Sundays. I don't know where that came from, to be honest.
Maybe I think we did talk about grocery shopping, so maybe it was kind of along the same line of laundry.
Doing like your weekly tasks that you could do during the other weekdays on Sunday.
So you could rest on the Sabbath.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the laundry itself. It's the idea of doing something.
Yeah, I mean, like continuing to get with the spirit of it and then coming up with specifics is the freedom of a Christian. And so, it can be like, on Sunday, you make laundry a family event where everybody washes, they take the
Together.
washboard and they
The
go to
washboard?
go to the bathtub.
Washboard abs.
And then they wash all their clothes together and
Yeah.
then they hang dry it and then they fold it together. That's a Sunday event.
Yeah, like a fun
Whatever
thing.
it is. I mean, whatever. Like, to be honest, the spirit needs to be there. the reason why we go into certain specific examples is because people think they have the Spirit, but we're trying to expose that specific task
Yeah.
doesn't actually hold to the Spirit that you profess.
Yeah.
And so we want to expose some of those things, which is why the podcast is so, nice. The benefit of podcasting is we can talk about that in a more casual manner.
Right.
But definitely when we talk about authoritative, we're talking about the Bible being authoritative.
Yep.
And then when we talk about things, it's to extrapolate from what is authoritative and to see how we live our lives. It's a test, and the test is measured up against the standard. The standard is the Bible.
I mean, like you said, biblical truth is biblical truth. I mean, there is a special place on Sunday mornings where the preacher goes to preach the word of God, and that there is something special about that, the ordinary means of grace. But even on the podcast too, biblical truth is biblical truth. Celsius, drinking Celsius is not biblical truth. So you could choose to ignore that. Please do ignore that. Actually, it's not good for you.
I mean, we said it before. It's about what is good, what is true, what is
Yeah.
beautiful. Think about these things.
Right.
And that's, I think, what we try to do on the podcast. We
Right.
try to think about what is good, what is true, what is beautiful, and we explore it. We go deeper.
Right.
And so hopefully, when we're challenged here, you're also challenged listening. And this is, it's about struggling too, finding out what is good. It's about digging and mining deep. And it's about challenging yourself to become better, more
Right.
sanctified. I think that's a beautiful thing. And if you're confused about something, great. But don't think that you should stay confused.
Yep.
Like, we're here to work it out together and continue to throw ourselves against the standard and make sure that we come out straight.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And again, if you can help it, don't drink Celsius. It's really.
It says here, do not exceed 2 servings per day. That can't be good for you.
How much is one can? 3 servings?
No, this is 1 serving.
Oh, okay.
Did I say 2? That means I can have 2.
I don't know because
Holler.
because I think, I don't know. I don't know anymore about anything Celsius related.
We're recording this before Sam goes on his marathon run
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yep.
So he's
Sam
questioning life.
recently found out that sodium is good for you.
Yep. I now take sodium supplements. So
It helps you absorb water better.
yeah, and it helps you not cramp. I didn't know there was a magic drug. Should have taken sodium when I had the chance. Anyway, thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we discuss children's questions. Now, what is that? See, that's a good one. Nobody knows what that is except for me. Can't wait to find out. Tune in next week to find out. Oh, yeah. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.